When you think about the mid-1960s, there was a trend in music which was called psychedelia, and it was very trippy music. The bands that were associated usually played with light shows swirling around behind them. Now, when you think of the psychedelic movement, there are a number of bands. You can think of Blue Cheer, which has actually been recorded as the loudest band ever. And then, of course, there was Quicksilver Messenger Service. But the band we're going to talk about in this episode started out with the idea that they wanted to model themselves after not a psychedelic band at all, the Young Rascals. And the reason this particular band wanted to emulate the Young Rascals is that they loved that organ sound. And they thought, maybe if we did something and made the organ a little more heavy and a little more trippy, we'd be onto something. So in 1965, they formed a group, and they called themselves the Electric Pigeons. But then they just shortened that to the Pigeons. They did get a recording contract with Atlantic Records, but Atlantic said, no, we're not putting out an album by a group called the Pigeons. You guys need to change your name. So they did, and they became the Vanilla Fudge. So are you ready? No sense in keeping you hanging on. Let's drop the needle. As I said, the Pigeons became Vanilla Fudge. And the band consisted of Carmine Appice on drums, Vince Martell on lead guitar and vocals, Mark Stein on organ and vocals, and Tim Bogert on bass and vocals. Their first album is self-titled. It's called Vanilla Fudge, and you can tell right from the cover this is something different in the way of music. The album was released in August of 1967, and it contains mainly cover songs. But I can guarantee you've never heard these songs performed this way before. There are two Beatles songs, the lead-off Ticket to Ride, and then the closer, Eleanor Rigby. Then there's their version of People Get Ready, their take on the Zombies' She's Not There, Bang Bang, the Sonny Bono song, and of course their big hit, which took a hit by the Supremes and drugged it and lengthened it out to almost 7 minutes. Yes, it's You Keep Me Hanging On. This debut album was Vanilla Fudge's biggest selling record. It went to number 6 in the US and 20 in the UK. The Vanilla Fudge certainly had a reputation for being pretty far out there, and their second album certainly confirms this. It's called The Beat Goes On. It was released in February of 1968. It's really a sound collage. It incorporates voice snippets from world leaders, past and present at that time, and snippets of little songs that kind of all mesh together. The record is divided into 4 phases. Phase 1 starts with The Beat Goes On. Then we get some Mozart music, Old Black Joe, Don't Fence Me In the Mood, and Hound Dog. Then there is a Beatles montage, where in just under 2 minutes they include truncated versions of I Want to Hold Your Hand, I Feel Fine, Day Tripper, She Loves You, and Hello Goodbye. Then we get into phase 2. Again, it's introduced and closed by The Beat Goes On. In between, they showcase 2 Beethoven songs, Fur Elise and Moonlight Sonata. And that's all just on side 1. Now let's flip the record over to side 2. This side starts with phase 3, and here we get Voices in Time, with vocal snippets from Winston Churchill, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harry Truman, John Kennedy, and others. And this particular piece goes on for 8 minutes. Then comes phase 4. The track is Merchant, the Game is Over, and it's almost 9 minutes, and the piece was written by the group. And then the album closes with yet another take on The Beat Goes On. The second album didn't sell as well as their first. It reached number 17 in the charts in the US. And just 4 months later, in June of 1968, they released their third album. The album is called Renaissance. It contains songs that they had written, like The Sky Cried When I Was a Boy, Thoughts, Paradise, and Faceless People. But the song that I like best on this album is their cover of Donovan's Season of the Witch. It's a trippy version at over 8 minutes long. And I know when I was on radio in Los Angeles, every Halloween I would play this song. It was always just a trip. The album could only reach number 20 on the charts. The band was touring quite a bit, and in February 1969 they released another album called Near the Beginning. Now, notice this cover. I've always thought this was strange. It looks very similar to an album that was put out by Al Kooper and Mike Bloomfield with Stephen Stills called Super Session. The Vanilla Fudge album opens with Shotgun, the Junior Walker and All-Stars song. Then there's Some Velvet Morning, and side 2 is a live song that takes the whole side, which was recorded at the Shrine Auditorium in LA, called Break Sound. The album reaches number 16. To support this album, Vanilla Fudge goes on tour, and for their opening act, they have a new band that just came out of England who had just released their debut album. So the opening act for Vanilla Fudge on this tour was none other than Led Zeppelin. And in fact, in a previous episode, I talked about going up to Chicago to see that concert with Vanilla Fudge. I think Jethro Tull was there too, and Led Zeppelin. The episode is called Hitchhiking. You might want to check it out. Late in the fall of 1969, Vanilla Fudge goes back into the studio to record their next album, Rock and Roll. It contains the songs Need Love, Lord in the Country, Street Walkin' Woman, a cover of The Windmills of Your Mind, and If You Gotta Make a Fool of Somebody. But the album didn't do very well. It stalled at number 34, and shortly after it was released, Vanilla Fudge breaks up. Tim Bogart and Carmen Appice form a new band called Cactus. And with Cactus, they release 4 albums in quick order. They are Cactus, One Way or Another, Restrictions, Hot and Sweaty. But Cactus had consistent personnel changes. And by 1972, Tim Bogart and Carmine Appice had had enough. And so they left Cactus and joined up with that legendary guitarist, Jeff Beck. They recorded 2 albums together. The first was Beck, Bogart, and Appice, and the second was Beck, Bogart, and Appice live in Japan. But after just these 2 records, the band broke up. The Vanilla Fudge reunited a few times. They came out with a best of album in 1982, and then they followed that in 1984 with an album called Mystery. But by 1988, they had broken up again. They regrouped again in 2005 and actually went on tour with the remaining members of The Doors. And then in 2007, one of their songs was picked for the final episode of the TV series The Sopranos. Of course, the song was You Keep Me Hanging On, because the finale was a cliffhanger. The band then recorded an album called Out Through the Indoor, which was a cover of Led Zeppelin songs. But in 2008, Bogart and Appice leave Vanilla Fudge and go back and rejoin Cactus. And the following year, Tim Bogart retires. In 2011, Vanilla Fudge, with the original members without Bogart, now replaced by Pete Bremy on bass, announced their farewell tour. But it really isn't, because they are still touring even today. In 2015, they released an album called Spirit of 67. And then in 2021, Tim Bogart, who's been fighting cancer, dies. He's 76 years old. And as I said, Vanilla Fudge continues to tour even to today. Now, as usual, I've created a Spotify playlist where you can go back and relive those heady times with Vanilla Fudge. Here's the link, which I also will put in the comments down below. And you can also find videos of Vanilla Fudge right here on YouTube. I just can't put them on my channel. Vanilla Fudge was certainly a band that helped define psychedelia. Go back and listen to some of those songs, and I'll bet before too long you'll be saying things like, far out, man. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep it rockin'.
If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.